There are deaths, and then there are deaths designed to outlast the body itself. Executions meant to echo through centuries, whispered about in hushed tones, debated by scholars who can barely stomach the details. The Viking blood eagle stands among the most horrifying methods of execution ever conceived by human imagination. But here's the question that haunts every historian who studies it: did it actually happen? Or is it something darker, a legend so vivid, so meticulously described, that we convinced ourselves it was real? Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the cold Scandinavian wind cutting across a fjord, the smell of salt water mixed with pine, and in the center of it all, a man naked, face down, bound. Around him stand warriors, their faces carved from stone, their eyes reflecting something between ritual devotion and primal violence. This isn't just death, this is theater, this is sacrifice. This is a message written in blood and bone, the blood eagle. Even the name carries weight, it doesn't comfort. It doesn't soften, it describes exactly what it is. A human back transformed into the spread wings of an eagle, ribs pulled apart like feathers, lungs exposed to the air. The method is so brutal that modern forensic experts have studied whether a human being could even survive long enough for the ritual to be completed. The answer is complicated. Let's begin where all dark histories begin, in the fragments, the sagas. The Old Norse texts that blend history with mythology so seamlessly that separating truth from legend becomes an archaeological nightmare. The blood eagle appears primarily in two sagas, the Orkneyinga saga and the Tale of Ragnar's Sons. Both texts were written centuries after the events they describe. Both carry the weight of oral tradition, passed down through generations, embellished, twisted, reshaped by time and the mouths that told them. In the Tale of Ragnar's Sons, the execution is performed on King Aelle of Northumbria. Aelle had captured the legendary Viking Ragnar Lothbrok and thrown him into a pit of snakes, a death meant to humiliate, to strip away the warrior's dignity. When Ragnar's sons learned of their father's death, they didn't seek simple revenge. They sought something eternal. They wanted Aelle's death to be so unforgettable that it would ripple through history, a warning carved into flesh. The saga describes it with chilling precision. Aelle is bound. His back is cut open along the spine. The ribs are severed from the vertebrae. One by one, they are pulled outward, bent back like the wings of a bird taking flight. The lungs are then removed from the chest cavity and draped over the exposed ribs, still attached, still moving with whatever breath remains. Some versions say salt was rubbed into the wounds, to prolong suffering, to purify, to add insult to agony. But here's where the darkness deepens. Modern medical experts, surgeons, anatomists, forensic scientists have examined the described procedure. Their conclusion: it's theoretically possible, but the victim would likely die from shock or blood loss within minutes. The severing of the ribs alone would cause catastrophic trauma. The exposure of the lungs would make breathing nearly impossible. If the blood eagle was real, it wasn't a prolonged execution. It was a butchering dressed in ritual language. So why describe it this way? Why construct such an elaborate, visceral image if the victim would die almost immediately? That's the question that shifts the entire investigation. Perhaps the blood eagle was never about the victim's experience at all. Perhaps it was about the audience, the witnesses, the enemies who would hear the story and feel their blood freeze, the allies who would see the commitment to vengeance and know this is not a people you cross. Let's examine the other famous case. The Orkneyinga saga describes the execution of Halfdan Longleg, an enemy of the Orkney Earls. The description is brief but visceral. Halfdan's back is carved open, his ribs broken, his lungs pulled free. The saga treats it almost casually, as if this is simply what happens to those who betray powerful men. But again, no contemporary accounts. No archaeological evidence, no bodies found with the specific trauma pattern that would confirm a blood eagle execution. This absence is significant. The Vikings were not shy about violence. Archaeological sites across Scandinavia and the British Isles reveal mass graves, weapon wounds, evidence of brutal combat. We've found decapitated bodies, individuals buried with their hands bound, victims of clearly violent deaths. But we have never found a skeleton with the precise damage the blood eagle would leave. Ribs severed symmetrically from the spine, bent outward, the pattern unmistakable. Does that mean it never happened? Not necessarily. It could mean it was rare. Reserved for the most hated enemies, performed only in exceptional circumstances. It could mean the bodies were disposed of in ways that left no trace, burned, thrown into the sea, deliberately destroyed. Or it could mean something else entirely. What if the blood eagle was never a real execution method? What if it was a mistranslation, a misunderstanding of poetic language that later generations took literally? Some scholars argue that the Old Norse term blaðrun could refer to a carving on the back, a symbol, a mark cut into the flesh, not the full anatomical horror described in the sagas. The word rista, often translated as to carve or to cut, appears in the texts. It's the same word used for carving runes. Could the blood eagle have been a ritualistic scarring, not an execution? This theory is compelling, but it doesn't explain the detailed descriptions. The sagas don't just say they carved his back. They specify ribs, lungs, the spreading of bone. If it was a mistranslation, it's remarkably consistent across multiple texts. And if it was purely symbolic, why describe the anatomy so precisely? Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Perhaps the blood eagle was real but rare. Perhaps it was attempted but never completed as described. Perhaps it was performed on corpses, enemies killed in battle, their bodies mutilated posthumously as a symbolic gesture. The distinction matters less to history than the fact that the Vikings wanted their enemies to believe they were capable of it. Terror is a weapon. It always has been. The Vikings understood this better than most. Their reputation for brutality spread across Europe like wildfire. Christian monks writing chronicles described them as demonic, savage, inhuman. Were these descriptions accurate? Or were they exaggerations designed to explain why sophisticated, fortified settlements fell so quickly to Viking raids? It's easier to accept defeat at the hands of monsters than at the hands of men who simply outsmarted you. The blood eagle fits perfectly into this narrative. It's the ultimate expression of Viking ruthlessness. It's proof that these warriors operated by a different moral code, that they valued honor and revenge above all else, that they were willing to commit acts so horrific that even describing them feels transgressive. And maybe, just maybe, that was the point. Let's talk about ritual, about meaning. The Vikings didn't separate violence from spirituality the way we do. Battle was sacred, death was a doorway. The gods themselves were warriors, Odin, Thor, Tyr, deities who understood blood and steel and the thin line between life and death. Sacrifice was central to Norse religion. Animals were offered to the gods. Prisoners were hung in Odin's honor. Human sacrifice, though debated, likely occurred in certain contexts. Could the blood eagle have been a sacrificial ritual, an offering to Odin, the god of war and death, who himself hung from the world tree Yggdrasil, pierced by a spear, seeking wisdom through suffering? The imagery is provocative. A man splayed open, wings spread, lungs exposed like an eagle in flight, Odin's sacred bird. The symbolism is too perfect to ignore. But symbolism doesn't require reality. Myth and ritual can exist in the abstract, in stories told to reinforce cultural values. The blood eagle might have been a metaphorical execution, a way of saying this person died in the most shameful, painful way imaginable, without actually performing the procedure. In a culture that valued oral tradition, where skalds composed poetry to immortalize deeds, the line between what happened and what was said to have happened blurs. Still, there's something about the specificity that nags at historians. The anatomical detail, the surgical precision. Someone somewhere understood human anatomy well enough to describe this process. Whether they enacted it or simply imagined it, they knew what they were describing. And that knowledge is itself unsettling. Let's consider the victims. Who were they? The sagas named kings and earls, men of power, enemies of consequence. The blood eagle was not for common criminals. It was reserved for those who had committed unforgivable acts. Betrayal, kinslaying, the murder of a great leader. In Viking society, where honor was everything, these crimes demanded extraordinary punishment. Death alone wasn't enough. The execution had to mean something. This is where we glimpse the psychology behind it. The blood eagle, real or imagined, represents total domination. It's not just killing your enemy, it's unmaking them. It's taking the human form, the sacred vessel, and transforming it into something alien, something bird-like, something that hovers between man and symbol. It's a statement that says, you are no longer human, you are an example, and examples are meant to be seen, remembered, repeated in stories until they take on a life of their own. The Vikings were masters of reputation management. They knew that fear could conquer as effectively as swords. When they raided the monastery at Lindisfarne in 793 CE, they didn't just steal treasure, they shattered the illusion of Christian sanctity. They proved that no place was safe, no god powerful enough to protect against cold steel and ruthless men. The blood eagle serves the same function on a personal level. It says, this is what happens when you cross us. Whether it actually happened becomes almost irrelevant. The belief that it could happen is enough, but let's not romanticize this. Let's not get lost in the cinematic appeal of Viking brutality and forget what we're actually discussing. If the blood eagle was real, it was torture. It was a human being, conscious and aware, experiencing unimaginable pain. The fact that it might have served a cultural or religious purpose doesn't make it less horrific. History is full of rituals that seem incomprehensible through a modern lens. Gladiatorial games, human sacrifice, public executions designed to maximize suffering. The blood eagle belongs to that category. And yet we're fascinated by it. Why? What is it about this particular execution method that captures the imagination? Perhaps it's the contrast. The Vikings, who created intricate art, sophisticated ships, democratic assemblies, also conceived of this. The duality. The reminder that civilization and savagery are not opposites but neighbors, that the same culture capable of beauty can also produce nightmares. Or perhaps it's simpler. Perhaps we're drawn to darkness because it reminds us of boundaries we hope we'd never cross. The blood eagle is a line drawn in blood, and studying it feels like standing at the edge of an abyss, looking down, grateful we're not falling but unable to look away. The debate continues. Scholars argue passionately on both sides. Some insist the blood eagle was real, that the anatomical descriptions are too precise to be fiction, that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. Others maintain it's a legend, a misunderstood phrase blown into myth by centuries of retelling. The truth may never be known with certainty. But here's what we do know. The Vikings wanted you to believe they could do this. They cultivated a reputation for fearlessness and brutality. They told stories that made enemies hesitate, that made kings pay tribute rather than fight. Whether the blood eagle was real or not, it worked. It's still working. 1,000 years later, we're still talking about it, still feeling that cold shiver when we imagine it. That's power. Not the power of the sword, but the power of the story. The power of a legend that refuses to die, that spreads like frost across the mind. That makes you question what humans are capable of when pushed to the edge of rage, grief, and the desperate need for justice or revenge. So was the blood eagle real? Did Viking warriors really perform this horrific ritual? The evidence is thin, the descriptions are vivid. The silence of archaeology speaks volumes, but so does the persistence of the legend. Maybe the question itself is wrong. Maybe it doesn't matter if it happened exactly as described. Maybe what matters is that people believed it could happen, and belief in the end shapes history as much as any blade. There's a final, darker thought. What if the blood eagle wasn't unique? What if every culture in its darkest moments conceives of something similar, a punishment so terrible it transcends death, becoming symbol and warning, the breaking wheel, the brazen bull, crucifixion, drawing and quartering. Humans have never lacked imagination when it comes to inflicting suffering. The blood eagle is simply the Viking version, their contribution to humanity's long, grim catalog of cruelty. And like all such methods, it tells us less about the victims than about the societies that created them, about what they valued, honor, revenge, reputation, about what they feared, humiliation, betrayal, being forgotten. Because that's the ultimate purpose of executions like this, not just to kill, but to be remembered, to ensure that long after the body has turned to dust, the story remains. And in that sense, whether the blood eagle was real or not, it achieved its purpose perfectly. History remembers. Even when we wish it wouldn't. Even when the details make us uncomfortable, when the descriptions feel too vivid, too visceral, too close to something primal we thought we'd left behind. The blood eagle survived because stories like it always survive. They lodge themselves in the collective memory, passed down through generations, whispered in the dark, impossible to forget. The Vikings knew this. They understood that true immortality isn't about living forever, it's about being remembered. And if the price of that memory is horror, if it requires carving your name into history with blood and bone, well, they were willing to pay it. So the next time you hear about the blood eagle, remember it's not just a story about an execution. It's a story about power, about terror, about the lengths humans will go to be remembered. It's a story about the past refusing to stay buried, about truths and legends becoming so tangled that separating them feels impossible. And maybe that's appropriate. Maybe some histories are meant to haunt us. Some truths are supposed to make us uncomfortable. Some shadows never fade, they just wait, patient and cold, for the next person brave or foolish enough to look directly at them. The blood eagle waits there still, in the sagas, in the debates. In the darkness at the edge of what we think we know about our ancestors and ourselves. Whether it was real or imagined matters less than the fact that we can't stop thinking about it. Can't stop asking. Can't stop feeling that cold wind across a fjord, smelling salt and pine and wondering history remembers, even when we try to forget.